Well, greetings, everyone. The passage today is Hebrews 7:11 to 28. I'll just read that through first and then just share a few thoughts on the passage. If perfection could have been attained through the Levitical priesthood, for on the basis of it the law was given to the people, why was there still the need for another priest to come, one in the order of Melchizedek, not in the order of Aaron? For when there is a change of the priesthood, there must also be a change of the law. He of whom these things are said belonged to a different tribe, and no one from that tribe has ever served at the altar. For it is clear that our Lord descended from Judah, and in regard to that tribe, Moses said nothing about priests. And what we have said is even more clear if another priest like Melchizedek appears, one who has become a priest not on the basis of a regulation as to his ancestry, but on the basis of the power of an indestructible life. For it is declared, you are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. The former regulation is set aside because it was weak and useless, for the law made nothing perfect, and a better hope is introduced by which we draw near to God. And it was not without an oath. Others became priests without any oath, but he became a priest with an oath when God said to him, the Lord has sworn and will not change his mind, you are a priest forever. Because of this oath, Jesus became the guarantee of a better covenant. Now there have been many of those priests since death prevented them from continuing in office, but because Jesus lives forever, he has a permanent priesthood. Therefore, he is able to save completely those who come to God through him, because he always lives to intercede for them. Such a high priest meets our need, one who is holy, blameless, pure, set apart from sinners, exalted above the heavens. Unlike the other high priests, he does not need to offer sacrifices day after day, first for his own sins and then for the sins of the people. He sacrificed for their sins once for all when he offered himself. For the law appoints as high priest men who are weak, but the oath which comes after the law appointed the Son, who has been made perfect forever. Apologies as well if you've got noise in the background. There's probably a generator thrumming in the background because we have a power cut at the moment. And maybe sort of the sound of flower sellers shouting to attract attention to people to come and buy from them. I'm sure someone's going to toot their horn very loudly in a minute. This is the daily background of life here where we live. Just say a privilege to be able to share a little bit. This is a really good process, really, of sharing and living in the Word together. I have to say, when Neil first sent the email out for this was probably one of the passages I was hoping to avoid because it's quite complex. But nonetheless, I think the more as we read it, and probably need to read it several times to make sense of it, actually some very profound things and some deeply encouraging things, particularly about the nature of Christ. And I'm sure as you've been studying Hebrews, the background to the book, really written to bolster the faith of particularly those of a Jewish background who were perhaps reconsidering their faith in Jesus, perhaps wondering, is this all true? Perhaps wondering, is this the right way? In particular, is Jesus the Messiah, given that in many ways the way that Jesus came and fulfilled that role of Messiah wasn't the way that everybody expected. And the writer of the Hebrews is reminding those, particularly from a Jewish background, look, Jesus is the Messiah, but also the Messiah has fulfilled and more than all the different expectations and regulations of the law, and now has opened this very, very new way. But there are a lot of challenges within that. Talking about Jesus as the high priest in the line of the Jewish faith raises some issues straight away, because the priest was supposed to come from a particular lineage, and Jesus clearly had ancestry from the tribe of Judah. Well, priests aren't supposed to come from the tribe of Judah, so what's going on there? And then the high priests themselves meant to be serving within the temple framework. Well, clearly Jesus wasn't physically present doing that. And particularly for Jewish believers who had chosen to follow the way, as it was called, one of the consequences of that was being cut off from the fellowship of, if you like, of Judaism. They would be considered to have lost their inheritance within the Jewish people. That was primarily a physical inheritance in land and the belongingness to the Jewish people, but also as part of that belongingness to being the people of God. So the question comes, were we right in doing that? Is Jesus still able to fulfill this role as the messianic high priest. And what the writer of the Hebrews points out, three very, very clear reasons why Jesus not only fulfills that role, but actually, if you like, super fulfills it and makes it something really quite different and far superior to anything that the ancestral heritage line of priests can do. First of all, we sort of see that in verses 14 and 15, and particularly 15. It says Jesus didn't become a priest through the ancestral line, but through the power of an indestructible life. It's an incredibly powerful phrase, this indestructible life, referring to Jesus rising from the dead. But not just that Jesus rose from the dead, that really it was impossible for Jesus not to rise from the dead. And what the writer means by this is, well, yes, Jesus died on the cross, but he was always going to rise again because he has an indestructible life. And where we go with this is not just that Jesus' divinity, but also the fact that because he lived a perfect life, he was going to rise from the dead. He couldn't be kept in the grave. That power of the indestructible life means that he then is the one who perpetually, permanently stands before the Father. Second as well, where the comparison with the earthly high priests, that Jesus, because he lived that perfect life, didn't need to be offering sacrifices himself right from the beginning. He was able to absorb and clear all the sins of all people because he himself was perfect. And therefore, he, by sacrificing himself for everybody, was able to and continually is able to intercede for the sins of everybody. And for that reason, it says very clearly here, such a high priest meets our need. I think this is particularly important for those believers who are as wavering in their faith. The writer to the Hebrews is saying, Jesus gives you what you need. You're not going to find that in the earthly high priests. You're not going to find that in the Jewish religious system, but you will find it in Jesus. And Jesus is able to save to the uttermost. Or it says in here, in chapter 7, verse 25, he's able to save completely. That word can also be translated as saved to the uttermost. I find it interesting reading in the Burmese translation where it says he's able to save always. He's able to save continually is the sense of that word. The Greek word that's used in there is used one other time in the New Testament, and that is in Luke, where it talks about a woman who had 18 years infirmity, where she was bent double, and it says she could not lift herself up to the full. And that word "to the full" is referring to she couldn't lift herself up to the full. And that's the same word that's used here. He's able to save to the full. Now, I find even comparing those two verses somehow deeply encouraging. We have this other place where that word was used in the New Testament, where somebody was bent double by a disease, as a picture, really, of people being bent double by the weight of sin in their own life, the weight of sin in the rest of the world. Bent double, I just can't get myself up. I can't raise myself up to the full, however hard I try. The word that we find, that same word we find in Hebrews, he's able to save to the full. When we read that account in Luke, Jesus heals the woman, and she is able to raise herself up to the full. Here, that same word is used. Jesus is able to save to the uttermost, to the full. And I think that's it's a lovely picture of not just that Jesus is able to save through the ages. Jesus is not a Messiah just for a particular period of time in history or for a particular group of people in history, or even a Messiah for a very particular sect within Judaism. He's the Messiah and the Savior for all times and all peoples. But also his saving is complete and to the end. It doesn't have an expiry date. We're not saved for a certain period of time, then it all starts over again. That's very important if you're someone who believes, like many people do in the world, of reincarnation and rebirths. One of the things is, when you're saved and you're part of God's people, you are permanently and forever part of God's people. But also you are saved completely. That completeness, being able to raise yourself up to the full, if you like, and that Jesus enables that complete restoration and healing. And I think that's tremendously encouraging. He is able to save completely those who come to God through him. Like the woman bent double, he's able to restore completely. We can lift up our heads again. He removes the sin and the shame. I hope that's a little bit of an encouragement today. Perhaps read that passage again 2 or 3 times. And I would say as well, perhaps at the same time, just for encouragement as well, flip back to that passage in Luke 13, where again that word is used, talking about a woman who was healed and saved completely. Be encouraged today, be blessed today. We're getting on a flight in a couple of hours. But yes, hope to see some of you at some point fairly soon in the future. Blessings.